Hi, I'm Morgan. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I read in January. Now, it is in fact March. Really should have done this several weeks ago, but uni has been literally kicking me in the face. So we're here now. I'm also emotionally drained because I watched the final episode of WandaVision this morning. So if I can't put together two thoughts, that's why. The first book that I read in January is one that I've actually talked about before but never actually went into detail on, and that is The Darkest Legacy by Alexandra Bracken. I'm incapable of holding these things up properly. There we go, you can see the lovely cover. So I thought that this was actually a 4-book series, but it turns out that it's actually like a trilogy, and then this sequel book that's set 5 years later and focuses on supporting characters from the original series. I say supporting characters, it's more like one supporting character, but all of our original faves are there and that's what matters. So this is set 5 years after In the Afterlight, and it focuses on Suzumi, who just goes by Zoo. She's 17 and she's been working with the government representing Psy kids. She's mostly just there to be a face that people recognise and to show that Psy kids aren't a threat, really. She does like speeches and things like that, and during one of these speeches at a university, I believe, there is an attack which she is blamed for, and she goes on the run with 2 other Psy kids, having been suddenly thrown back into this world of fear and paranoia that she thought she had left behind. I absolutely loved this. I love this series, in case you hadn't noticed. I mentioned it in my best books video. I love this now. I just love it. Alexandra Bracken's writing is just, it's so good. It makes being in the minds of the main characters so easy. Like, it's comfortable, if that makes sense. It doesn't really make sense, but hopefully you get what I mean. It's just a good read. It's just fun to read, easy to read. Like I said, I don't have 2 brain cells to rub together. Here we are. I wasn't sure going into this book how I would feel about the point of view change, but I really like Zoo, and I like how she's different from Ruby, particularly in how she thinks about and interacts with her powers. I also thought that there was a good balance between old and new characters, because obviously Zoo trusts and relies on Liam and Ruby and Chubbs and Vida because they are essentially her found family, which is my favourite trope. But the good thing about this book is that she still does a lot herself. Bracken lets Zoo show that she is strong and capable, and that she can look after herself and the people she cares about the way that they have always looked after her. Roman and Priyanka, who are kind of the 2 new main characters, I love them. They're great. I love that they were Zoo's friends that she made herself outside of everything else, because even though they are kind of there for Ruby, they get to know Zoo and they love her for who she is, because they experience her outside of this world that she's grown up in and is used to. Speaking of Ruby herself, I think that the choice to keep her out of the book was actually a really good choice. It allows us to see what all of the other characters are thinking and feeling while Ruby is off being a self-sacrificing idiot, like always. Like, I love her, but she needs to let people care about her. Come on, Ruby. It's been 5 years, come on. And by having her kind of the one they are chasing, it stops Ruby from taking over the narrative, especially because she was the protagonist of the original series and, you know, there's a lot of love for her. And she's a badass who will take over if her friends are in danger. And the thing about keeping Ruby kind of separate from everybody else allowed us to see Zoo's relationship with the boys, with Liam and Chubbs, and also a bit with Vida, although she isn't in it as much, without the focus being on Ruby or seeing it through Ruby's lens. Plot-wise, I like that it was linked with the original series, but not a direct continuation, if that makes sense. It's been 5 years, things have changed, people have changed, but the world hasn't miraculously fixed itself. And I think that this was a realistic expansion of the universe. The next 3 books that I read were actually kind of zines. I don't know technically what they are classed as, but they're called I think it's Hellebore? I don't know, but I have 3 of them. They all have very beautiful artwork. They're kind of occult magazine things. I found these really interesting. I'm into creepy occult stuff, and these looked specifically at like British folklore, which I found really interesting because I'm just kind of into the occult of my country. I should mention that these are non-fiction, so most of the articles were really well written, and it was clear that the authors are very passionate about what they're writing about and actually were educated in the field, which makes non-fiction so much easier to read. Also, like I already mentioned, looking at the covers, the art of all of them is really, really beautiful. It works really well with the individual aesthetic of each of the issues, and honestly the art is just as interesting as the articles. Some of it is really minimalist, like this. Some dancing witches, absolutely beautiful. And there's also a lot of like stylized photography. It's just really good. I need to buy the next one. The next book that I read was End of Days by Susan E. This is the last in the was it Penryn and the End of the World? No, it's Penryn and the End of Days. That's why it's called End of Days. Duh. So it's the last in that series. Anyway, I gave this one 3 stars. This was kind of a trip. This series is about angels that come to Earth and essentially start the apocalypse. Yeah. This one is essentially just about Penryn and Raph trying to save the humans and make the angels back off. Also, Raph gets his wings back, but it's very anticlimactic. Like, there's not really a lot to say about that. It's been a whole plot point since the first book, and here we are. This was a lot more kind of meh than the first 2 books. Not really any other way to say it. It wasn't bad, just less fun, I would say, than the first 2. And I think that's partly because the plot has gotten really repetitive. The big battle at the end was cool, so was the kind of travelling back in time to past hell thing to get the Watchers. I don't know. That part was interesting. But outside of that, there was a whole lot of stuff that was just repetitive and boring, to be honest. Overall, it was a fun series to read, but I don't think I'm going to remember much about it next year. I don't really remember much about it right now, so doesn't exactly bode well. The next book I read was The Road to Woodbury by I just mixed up their names. Robert Kirkman and Jay Bonansinga. Congratulations, Morgan. Fantastic. I gave this 3 stars. That's probably going to be my rating for like the entire series, to be honest. This is book 2 in the series, and it's set in the Walking Dead universe, in case you hadn't figured that out for yourself. And these are kind of a prequel to the Governor storyline that's in the comics and the TV show. This one follows Lily Call, who I believe is our new protagonist for the rest of the series. It's not first person, so not like point of view protagonist, but she's one of the people we're going to be following now. And this one specifically focuses on how her and her friends end up in Woodbury. Woodbury. I don't have an American accent, so it sounds funny. This one was fine. Like, I'm probably more interested in the overarching story, like kind of seeing more about the fall of the Governor and seeing it from his side instead of Rick's side. But The characters in these books I'm finding aren't as interesting and endearing as the characters from the comics or the TV show. Lily's characterization is kind of a bit everywhere, and that makes me frustrated with her. Sometimes she does do what I expect her to do, whether I like it or not, but sometimes she doesn't. And it's just a bit wishy-washy, which can make it more frustrating to read, when really this should be a fun, easy read, because it's not that long and the writing is not hard to understand. So I feel like this series is going to be profoundly mediocre, but I already own all the books because I got half of them for like barely anything in the works. So I'm going to read them all. They might be bad, but I'm going to read them all. The next book I read was Last Night I Sang to the Monster by Benjamin Alire Saenz, I think. I can never pronounce his name. I've looked it up so many times, but I always pronounce it wrong. I gave this 5 stars, which is unsurprising because everything this man has ever written has made me cry. Like many queer teens, I read Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe when I was 14, and my soul was cracked open. So I'm just kind of slowly working my way through everything else that he has written. This is about a teenager called Zach, who is currently in a rehab facility for addiction, specifically alcoholism, in the wake of a traumatic event that he really does not want to think about. Benjamin, who I'm going to call Benjamin because I cannot pronounce his second name and also because I love him dearly, his writing can be jarring and disorientating if it's not something that you're used to, or if you don't really like poetic language. If you're not into very kind of introspective stuff, I can understand why you might not particularly like the way he writes. But I do. I think that he portrays mental health and internal emotional pain in such an amazing way. It's like he just finds the perfect words, the perfect image to make you understand what his characters are feeling. This deals with addiction and trauma and dysfunctional family and what it's like to be actively trying to recover. Actively trying to battle your demons. In that sense, it is quite different from the other books of his that I've read, but I did really enjoy it. And it did, as always, make me cry. So, also, he has a kind of fixation on words and what they mean, like the significance of specific words and the significance of applying them to yourself and your life. That comes into like all of his books from what I've seen, which I think is really interesting. And I'm always really interested to see how he interprets certain phrases, certain meanings. I don't know, it's really interesting. The next book I read is actually a play called The Bedbug by Vladimir Mayakovsky. Pretty sure that's how you pronounce it. I didn't give this a rating because it's for uni. I read it for my Soviet literature and translation class. This is a peculiar play. This has a kind of utopia slash dystopia in it, and it kind of criticises communism in the idea of the Bolsheviks, but also doesn't. It's not like outright against it, which is what people think of when they think of works that critique a certain way of thought. But this also critiques the society that existed at the time it was written and kind of at the time of the revolution. There's way too much to discuss about this, and that is shit that I'm going to put in an essay, not on YouTube. I mean, also I could put it on YouTube, but I'm not gonna. We're not here to do massive essays. I don't have the brain power for that. But reading stuff that's kind of removed from what I usually read, that's from another country in another time period, has been really fun, and I actually found this play really interesting and enjoyable. The next book I read was Richard II by Shakespeare, also sometimes called King Richard II. I don't actually know if it officially has the king or not, because I see both, and it's been frustrating to no end. And to do with the fact that it's different everywhere. Funny story, I accidentally bought Richard III for my class. So now I have a copy of that too, which is up there. I had to then buy this because we're actually studying Richard II. So you'll see me reading Richard III at some point. I gave this 4 stars. It's one of Shakespeare's many historical plays. I know that like historical stuff is a thing in Renaissance plays, but Shakespeare does it so much. There's so many of them. And I actually really enjoyed this one. I find that for me, Shakespeare is usually a hit or a miss. But I liked this. I liked all the kind of nature imagery and the weird politics that was sometimes mocked. I don't know, it's just good Shakespeare. It's good Shakespeare. Although I did notice that there was a serious lack of women. Like, even for a Shakespeare play, there was a lack of women. So do with that information what you will. And the last book that I read in January, because yes, January was a long month and I read 10 books, is We by Yevgeny Zamyatin. It is Zamyatin, I'm not sure about the first name. This is another one that I read for my Soviet literature and translation class, and I gave it 3 stars. This is a utopia / dystopia, and it explores kind of communist themes. It focuses on this guy whose name is a number, which is why I'm not going to say it because I've forgotten it already. And it's kind of set in a futurist communist society. Like, not the kind of society that they were like, we're going to have it in 10 years. Like, future. Everything is orderly and controlled. Everyone is equal. There's kind of a pseudo-dictator called the Benefactor. And our leading man meets a woman who does not act at all how she's supposed to in their society. And it leads to him kind of questioning everything around him. I think the most interesting thing about this book is that Zamyatin didn't have like a specific message he was trying to put across, which we in the West assume is a feature of utopian and dystopian writing. Zamyatin in this does not appear to be for or against specific ideals on any side. He's not fighting for one political ideology, he's exploring them. He's interested in looking at a possible future and what that means for society as a whole, at large. Particularly, he is focusing on ideas of the time about the betterment of individuals and humanity as a whole. And those are all the books that I read in January. I'm already behind in all the things that I wanted to make videos about. So hopefully I'll try and film some more and catch up a little soon and fill you in on everything. I need to do a February wrap up. I have an unhaul to film because I have a bunch of books that I'm getting rid of. And I also still need to do the worst books of 2021. The only reason I haven't done that yet is because I know it's going to be long and I haven't had time. I'm also halfway through my final semester of my undergraduate degree, which is terrifying. So I might not actually be around consistently until like, I don't know, June? I guess we'll see. But either way, thank you so much for watching. I'd love if you could like, comment, subscribe. Come chat to me in the comments down below or in my social medias, which will be linked in the description. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye!